Thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of Outside the Box. I'm your host, Onney, the CEO, and today I have a beautiful, a glorious, a magnificent female entrepreneur in the building. She is a friend of mine, and I am very impressed with her strides. So I want you guys to buckle up your seatbelts because you're now plugged in, tuned in, tapped in to Outside the Box. Thank you once again, and without further ado, I want to introduce our next guest. She is a mother. She's an entrepreneur. She's also an author. Give it up for Dahlia McCutchen.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, thank you for coming on, especially on short notice.
It's been a long time coming for us to do this. So I'm super excited to be here. And I thank you so much for inviting me. And oh my God, this is amazing.
Well, I've been following you for years, and I am inspired by your story. And this particular platform in general is a platform that I created to raise awareness to people like yourself that has inspired me, that have decided to live outside the box and share their journeys and share their stories without worrying about what people think or bowing down to the demands of the society. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
That is what inspired me to reach out to you, to have you on this show. So thank you again for coming. And I want you, I gave you an introduction, but I also want you to enlighten our viewers a little bit more about what it is that you do. Because you actually do more. You're an actress, too. You have a lot of stuff going on.
Yes.
And a producer.
Yeah.
So go ahead on and drop some gems for us.
Well, I am a mother first.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, I'm a mother. I'm an author. I'm a woman of God.
Okay.
I own a military company that I started back in 2014 when I was pregnant with my son. And I fell on hard times financially, and a lot of stuff was going on. And I just decided one day that I needed to do something to better myself, to better my brand, and to step outside the box. And when I started that company, I was actually helping someone else get their company going. And the money that I thought that I was making, I wasn't making that money. I was making that money for someone else. So I tapped into my computer skills, looked up all of the military codes, and did everything that I needed to do as far as researching how to start a military company. 6 months, I became the owner, minority CEO of my own military company where I buy and sell products to the military, the troops. I deal with the government. Above that, I am also working on a documentary for pretty much my life and the shift, because it's all going to coincide with basically all together. I'm helping direct my autobiography, which is I Testify. And I'm just dibbling and dabbling in a whole bunch of other stuff. I'm starting my own skincare line, which is inspired by my daughter because she struggles with the teenage acne and things of that nature. My own workout line and a couple of other things that I want to dibble and dabble in. I want to motivational speak around the world. I mean, I'm on a mission.
Well, you can do it all.
Yes.
I tell that to all my viewers. Some people, they prefer to just stick to one thing, but I'm an outside the box kind of girl.
Yes.
I do a little bit of everything myself. So whenever I find a woman that wants to expand her territory and step out and try things to be able to create a legacy, I always cheer them on. So I commend you for doing that.
Thank you. Well, when you come from a place of where I come from, opportunity is not really afforded. Mm-hmm. We don't get second chances, and we can kind of talk about that a little bit later. But you really don't get the second chance that you want. And so you have to create your own lane. And so the reason that I do so much is that if one thing fails, I have something that I can fall back on.
Right.
So that's the reason for all
now,
of
my
that.
first time being introduced to you as an author was your book, I Testify. When I saw that you came out with that book, now what inspired you to come out? What is the story behind it? Everybody's book have a story. What was your story behind that one?
My testimony.
Mm-hmm.
It was, my life. And I'd been wanting to write a book since I was about 16 years old. And to be a 16-year-old and have a story already was serious. And I just remember my godmother telling me that you're going to write a book. You've always said that you're going to write a book. And then Tupac told me when he was incarcerated that you're going to write a book. And I didn't believe it to the point where I said it so much that it did not happen. But I kept telling myself, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm going to write a book, to where I was hearing people saying, she's not writing a book. She's not going to write a book.
Yeah.
And one day I woke up, and it wasn't I Testify first. I believe that, and I know that it was God who led me to finish that book, because the shift actually came first. And I was dealing with something and a whole lot of stuff. And when it was time to write I Testify, I had to be spiritually grounded. I had to be mentally stable. I had to be authentic and transparent. And I had to live in my truth. So what inspired me to actually write that book was the fact that I came out of everything dirty, everything horrific. And I'm able to talk about it. I'm able to tell people. I'm able to look at other women and say, I made it through that. You can too.
That's how you take your power back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's when the healing really begins, when you could take the stones that life threw at you and actually build something with it and stand on it.
Yes.
Because it's something when you can testify to the things that you've been through, regardless of the ridicule that may come with it, and stand in your truth and stand in your power. Then the next person that comes along that decides they want to share your dirty little secrets won't have power over you, because you've already did a tell-all to I testify. I testify, yes, I've been through these things. Yes, this has happened to me, but this is how I also testify that I overcame it. This is where I am, and I am the rose that grew from concrete. So I commend you.
Thank you
on sharing your testimony in that book, and I advise the viewers, the listeners out there, to look it up. Make sure you get you a copy of I Testify. You will not be disappointed in making that purchase. Now, how long have you been writing? Have you always been a writer? Because I know you said that you knew at 16 you had a story to tell. Had you always been writing, or was it just held inside of you?
I believe that it was held inside of me because, like I said, my godmother told me, I used to scribble on brown paper bags, and I could always tell a story. And I knew that I wanted to do something that told a story, if not my story. And I knew it was always in me. I just didn't tap into what greatness I knew that I actually had inside of me. Because I feel like when I write, I'm a beast. And when it comes out, it's mind-blowing, the things that I can write. My writing wasn't always great. My vocabulary was very limited. And so I started educating myself more, reading more books, reading different books, and just trying to expand my mind the best way I knew how, so that my next book was just as great as the first or the second or the third.
Right.
So I knew that it was there. I just didn't tap into what was great inside of me.
So when did you actually tap into it?
When I went through heartbreak.
Yeah.
When I went through another set of struggles. When I went through something that was different than the journey that I had already been on. So I had already been on the journey of being raped, being molested, going down a path that led to death and destruction. It was when I actually fell into heartbreak and financial strain and being broken and being broke that I fell down on my knees and was like, okay, God, what's next? And so one day I just remember sitting, and I write about it in the shift, that I was sitting on my stairs and I was crying, and I was going through a transformation in transitions. And I was crying, I was broken, and I asked God, why? And in that moment, it's so crazy because I used to always talk about the older women in church, and she not praising the Lord, she not, and she's not doing this, and she need to sit down. And God tapped me and said, just shift. I was like, what? And I'm on the phone with my pastor, and he said, Dahlia, that's it. And I was like, that's it. And we prayed, we got off the phone, and I heard it in my spirit. I'm about to flood your mind with the words that are going to follow the book that I want you to write for me. And the shift actually came before I testified, because I felt like that's what I needed to do first, because I had to shift. Right. If I did not shift and did not shift into where I needed to be, then I wasn't going to write I Testify the way that it was supposed to be.
Well, I am, I just saw 11:11 on the clock, but I am just a real big testifier to things that can happen in the most uncomfortable situations. You know, how the coal is pressed. You know, you got to think about that. I call it the dark night of the soul. And that is usually when you're broken or you feel like you're broken. But in actuality, you're broken open, because that is when you can discover yourself. That is when you can discover the great side of yourself and the not so great side of yourself, because now you're forced to live with the decisions that have got you to that point. And sometimes you can find yourself in that cave alone, because some journeys God needs you to walk alone. Is the only way you're going to learn, because as long as you keep attaching other people to your walk, you're going to continue to learn that same lesson. Now, it may be a different scenario with a different person, like you mentioned how you went through the rape and the domestic violence and everything. And that pain, I'm sure from each one of those circumstances, we as individuals go through somewhat of a dark night of the soul to outgrow that. We go through the breaking of the trauma bonds and et cetera, et cetera. However, if you really get to the core of it, the pain resonates the same. And so if the pain of the dark night of the soul resonates the same with those things that trigger you, then you have to find the common denominator in that trigger, which is yourself. And the only way to change the trajectory of your reality is to shift. Is to shift. So, so shout out. You also have the book, The Shift, that is out. And it is available for those that want to get it. Now, is that the book that you're going to be changing into a film, or are you going to be bringing them together?
Both books will definitely be a film. The Shift, I really wanted to go hand in hand with my documentary. I Testify is a movie in itself. So 2 different projects, 2 different situations, 2 different powerful stories.
Now, you say that I heard you mention Tupac. How can you give us a little dynamic on where you guys friends? I mean, not to pry, but I get that you guys were friends at one time, and he was one of the people that inspired you to also write a book, as you mentioned to us. Did I put you on the spot with that one?
No, not on the spot. Without giving too much away from the book, I was very close to him. Friend, mentor, a little bit more. He was, oh my God, just amazing. And his inspiration, his words, his demeanor, how he led you, how he moved you was, it leaves you speechless. He told me that I would write a book, and I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that I had that greatness inside of me. And he would always tell me, keep pushing, keep going, don't stop, and it's so crazy to be 17, 18 years old and around hip hop royalty.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand that until now. I'm like, oh my God, I knew this person. I was around that person. But it wasn't about that. It was about what I was being taught, what ways I was being taught, which way not to go, which way to go, how to actually be great. And just being inspired by somebody like that, being around somebody like that. At that age, if I would have known then what I know now, I probably would have tapped into the greatness that he saw inside of me as well as other people. But, you know, I write about it in my book, how he was just a mentor, how he was just everything that probably every woman he's ever met, knew, been friends with. They would probably share the same story, that he was an amazing person. And, you know, when he was in prison, and I really, like I said, without giving too much away from the book, when he was in prison, he did something really, really special for me. Moved me from Houston, Texas to California, because I was actually in a situation where I was being raped, and I was being brutally raped and beaten. And, you know, it got back to him, and before I knew it, I was living in L.A. with, you know, some people that were set up in an apartment that he had, and it was just, wow. And that the last conversation that we had was, don't stop. Keep going.
That is awesome. So what triggered you to put it out? Because you had started writing. What was the trigger to say, what caused you to pull that trigger on that and say, it's time to release my story? Because sometimes we'll write a book and we'll sit on it. So what was that aha? It's time to let it go.
There were some things that were happening around with certain letters that Tupac had written and certain pictures and, you know, memorabilia that were hitting the internet. And a friend of mine called me and said, hey, somebody made X amount of dollars on selling this. And I was like, what? And I was at a very, very broken and pivotal point in my life where I was like, she was like, do you have, you know, letters? And I was like, yeah, I have letters. And I prayed about it because I've been sitting on letters and memorabilia and things that belong to us that I didn't share with a lot of people. People knew that I had pictures and people knew that I had letters, but I would never let them go because those were memories that I had with him. And so there was one time where I was helping not only myself, but other people. And I let go of one or two letters. And like I said, I prayed about it. And I said, what letter would he want me to release that he would be okay with? And so I released and auctioned off 2 letters. And what was it? Some negatives. We don't even have negatives anymore, but some negatives. And so in that moment, it was like, you're putting this out here. You're putting your letters out here. You're putting these pictures out here that you have of Tupac. You have to back it up now. It's time to back up everything that you were saying, everything that you were telling all of your friends and all of your family that didn't believe in you and didn't believe you. Now you have to back it up, but you have to back it up for yourself. Because this is your life. And this is something that he said. So I think that it was a chain reaction of someone calling me saying, hey, this is what's happening. But in that moment, it was as if Pac was still blessing me because I didn't give away all the letters. I didn't give away all the stuff that I actually still have. But it was like I was still being blessed to give the world a piece of him that was given to me. And it helped me in a way that I could actually release the book financially and do it on my own with the help of my publicists and, you know, editors and things of that nature. And it was like, okay, now is the time.
Yeah.
Because now you're putting it out there. It's on the internet, and this auction place is putting this out here. So now you have to be the voice that you've always said that you wanted to be. And it was time.
It was time.
It was time.
Oh, man.
It was time.
Everybody going to go and get that book. Now, is that the details that's in the shift?
It's that's in I Testify.
Testify.
Yes, it's in I Testify. I actually made a copy of the letters that I auctioned off and the pictures, and I placed the envelope and some other stuff, some little gifts in the book, to where, you know, it's solidified that relationship, that friendship, that mentorship. And it was crazy because no one ever really saw it coming.
Right.
It was always, oh, she's writing a book, and where is it?
Now, once you released your book, how were you received by your loved ones, your family? Because you also shared some things that weren't so on the highs. You had some lows that you shared, and a lot of times we deal with in family dynamics, people being embarrassed about what happens on their watch, and so they don't want you to stand in your truth because of how it makes them look. So how did that affect you when you decided to share your truth with the world?
It tore my family apart.
Mm-hmm.
It tore my family apart because I spoke my truth, and I spoke my side of my story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so crazy because it's been 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually have a really good connection after 5 years of not speaking to my family. It's the day before Mother's Day. I rekindled that friend. I'm going to start crying. I rekindled that friendship.
Mm-hmm.
I rekindled that mother-daughter relationship, that sibling relationship where it was done.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that only God himself can mend this, because I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
They were done, and it hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And when I wrote the book, at that point in my life of writing the book, when I knew that I had to do this, I didn't care who I hurt. I didn't care what anybody thought at that point, because I wasn't telling my story. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't living in my truth, and I was being silent, and I was being silent and crying in my own world. Like,
Right.
I went through this.
Right.
I'm still going through some of this.
Right.
So, even now, speaking back to my relatives, we don't discuss the book. We discussed it one time, and it was, this is how it felt, and this is why I felt this way. And my truth is, it wasn't written to demean my family.
Right.
It wasn't written to hurt anyone that was my blood. Mm-hmm. But it's what I went through. Mm-hmm. Now, the other parts and the other people, the demons and demonic spirits that I had to encounter through my journey, I meant every word of it. Mm-hmm. But with my family, it wasn't my intention to hurt them, but it was my intention to speak my story, to tell my truth.
Right. And that's so important. And I can tell you that it's okay, because as long as if you wake up, if your family is still here tomorrow and you're still here tomorrow, you have an opportunity to mend that broken fence. Because sometimes a conversation, just a real down earth conversation, like, I'm not placing blame on you. I'm not trying to say you intentionally allowed these things to happen. I just need you to acknowledge that it happened.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't remember it happening that
Absolutely.
way, me remembering it and me telling you that it still bothers me should be enough. And sometimes you don't even want them to give you an answer as to what, why, when, where, how, because they cannot undo any of that. Just accept it, acknowledge it, remind you that you are loved, sometimes it's just enough. So it's so important to have that conversation. And I had a guest a couple weeks ago, and we discussed the domestic violence and, molestation that happens in families. And it happens a lot that it's such a taboo conversation. Yes. But it's something when you can address the elephant in the room and get past it, because what you're doing in that process is literally breaking generational curses, because it happens because no one has ever had the conversation. So if we can't have the conversation to find out where the problem started, we can't prevent it from happening in the future with the kids that are to come behind us. So I do commend you for stepping out into the fire and taking that risk. And taking that risk. Some people will disagree, but I'm telling you, I co-sign. Okay?
Well, we have a very, very good relationship now, and I think awesome. From here, it's onward from here. Like I said, we don't bring it up, and so it was hot. The fire was hot.
Yeah.
It's
we
still
don't bring
hot.
it up either.
It's still hot, but you know, when you've walked on coals and fire, there's nothing else that can burn you like that. Yeah, you just keep going.
You just feel untouchable.
Yes, yes.
You know what? Like, I manifest my reality.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. We good.
Yeah, it's a little hot, but it's okay. I walked on fire
so
before.
when you decided to come out with your books, did you have a support team initially, or was it just something that you just stepped out and your vibe sent your tribe type of deal?
You know what? I had a support team. I have a support team, and I lost some people along the way.
Mm-hmm. That's called growth.
Yes, and I still have my support system. I love them. You know, we fuss, we fight, we disagree, but I have some amazing women in my corner right now, and you know, we as women, you know, we bump heads. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I've bumped heads and I've agreed to disagree, and we've had those knockdown, drag out arguments, but what has been produced and birthed from all of that has been greatness, and I have the most amazing support system, and I love them so much. Even we don't talk all the time and every day, but, you know, we'll send a DM here or a text message here just to say I love you, and, you know, we're still on this amazing journey of life, of my life, and where I'm going, so I love them. Yeah. I do. They make me mad sometimes, but I love them.
So what advice could you give someone who may see themselves or see a mini version of themselves in you? Like, they have a story that they've been holding on to and they want to be able to be as brave as you were. What advice could you give them?
You have to let go. The hardest thing is letting go of the trauma, letting go of the hurt. You have to let go first, because once you let go, you can heal. Okay. And I think that if you are going on the journey that I've been on and have traveled, you have to let go. You have to let go and let God. You know, wherever you are in your spirituality, you have to have some higher power that you pray to, that you talk to. And once you let go, let God, and you heal, and you tap into that inner self of I'm fire, I'm great, and dope. You know it, but you have to, me personally, I think that you have to have that support system. You have to have those people that will call you up no matter what. Like today, I got a call today, and you know, I'm not going to say the exact words because I don't want to curse, but she called me on my BS, and she said, I'm calling you on your BS. You're great, and you are greatness, and you're allowing this and that to distract you from these projects that you're working on. And I think for anybody that is trying to tap into, let go of, and heal and be great, you have to have those friends, those family members that call you on your shit and get you to a point where you understand that you are allowing whatever it is that's hindering you to block your blessings of being great. So in order for you to be great, you got to let go, let God, and be you, do you, and don't worry about what nobody is going to say, because that is one of the reasons why I was afraid to write the book, to tell my story, to tell someone that I was heartbroken and that I was dealing with this and I was going through that. I was afraid. But when I became unafraid, and when I became the woman that I always wanted to be, stood up, shoulders back, this is me, and looking at other women, such as yourself, because you are inspiration to me as well.
Thank you.
Looking at other women who were doing their thing, I was like, I want to do that. I want to be that.
Right. And you can do it.
You can do it. Yeah. But you have to have that inner self-love. And I didn't have that. But when I tapped into it and I got it, and I started loving myself again, I told myself, you are untouchable. You are unstoppable. Yeah. Let that train go. And I let that train go. That train is moving on go right to Georgia.
So if it's something you would do different, what would it be if you could?
Nothing. If you would have asked me that 5 years ago, I would have probably said something, but I don't know what it would have been. But I wouldn't change anything, because my journey is my story. It is my life. And it has led me up to this moment where I can talk about it. I can speak about it. Am I fully healed? Absolutely not. Am I still healing?
I know this is about you, but what I wish I would have done was stood in my truth a lot sooner. because I probably could have started my healing process sooner. But, we don't know. I guess it happens in God's time when it's supposed to happen. Because we always think, oh, when we turn 40, that's old to us when we 20. But I'm 40 now, and I think I'm at my prime.
I'm 21.
Yeah,
I'm
I wear my 40 well. And I feel like I'm still in my prime when you think about it and you meet people that are 80 years old. And you compare it to where you are now, you're like, man, I still got 40 years to make something of myself. Yeah. When you think of the larger scale of it, and it kind of takes you off this trajectory of this timeline, like I have to have it done right now, or, by the time I get 40, it's too late type of situation. So I just wish I would have stood in my truth a lot sooner. I hid behind the persona of, Onney, because everyone knew Onney to be so great. They did not know those dark sides of me or what I had to heal from or go through. And I'm still in the process of being transparent about my walk and my story. So I'm inspired and motivated by people like yourself that can be completely transparent without fear of judgment or of loss of friends, because if you can lose a friend or a loved one by standing your truth, they're really not your friend.
Yeah. I can't say that I would have wanted to live in my truth sooner, because sometimes, and it goes back to the shift, sometimes we still have to go through some stuff. Mm-hmm. And we still have to learn from some stuff. Mm-hmm. What I have wanted to learn a little bit earlier and lesson learned, but when you are destined for greatness and God has something great on your life, you're going to always go through something, a distraction, some destruction, a pause, a break, sitting in park. Mm-hmm. Sitting in park. And when I wrote The Shift, everything that you are saying, I wish I would have learned earlier. It's all a part of your shift. Mm-hmm. It's all a part of where you're going, because we're God's vehicle. Mm-hmm. So if you would have learned how to drive at 11 years old, and God said, okay, I'm going to put you behind the wheel of this car, but you ran into all these wrecks and collisions, but I want you to wait just a little bit longer for you to learn the lesson, because you're not old enough. You're not ready. You're not ready to drive. So in those moments of, I wish I would have learned it earlier, sometimes we have to wait for God to actually get us behind the wheel that we're supposed to be behind, so that we can actually learn to drive. Because you don't want to run into a wreck. You don't want to run into that stop sign or that yield or that collision or that moment of going into reverse. And you're like, well, where am I going? Because the purpose of being in reverse is to turn around and go back into drive. Mm-hmm. And so when we get to the point of, I wish I would have learned a little bit earlier, in those moments of, I wish I would have learned a little bit earlier, are those moments where God was actually your mechanic.
Shout out. Amen goes there.
He was your mechanic. He is your tow truck driver. So when you're in neutral, he pulls you and pushes you. You're still going to learn the lesson, even if it's down the line. Yeah. But you have to shift and allow him to take the wheel. So when it's time for you to get the wheel and take the wheel, you're ready to drive on your own, and lesson learned.
Well, you guys, it is about to be our time, and I just want to say thank you, Dahlia, for coming, for sharing a little bit of your journey, for promoting your books, for telling us what we can be on the lookout for. And your handle on social media again for Instagram?
Dahlia McCutchen, Facebook, Dahlia McCutchen. It's Dahlia McCutchen all over.
That's where we can find you. And you can definitely find Outside the Box on more than just one social media platform. You can find us on Google Play, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Find a platform that works for you. Like us, follow us, subscribe to us. I am Onney, the CEO. I'm your host, and you have been Outside the Box.